I just want more of this world, and every time I journey into it, I am just blown away and desperately fighting to not buy a bunch of miniatures.
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to say if you enjoy our content and want to stay up to date with our videos, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. So, on to the video.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Random Drop. And this week, I want to talk about Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Let's get into it. So where to begin? I played the original Space Marine many years ago. I wonder if it's on my old YouTube channel. I should probably see if it's there, but I knew nothing about the Warhammer 40k universe. I've heard of bits and pieces, specifically from Total Biscuit, was someone I really admired and looked up to back in the day, and of course that man passed away. And it's really funny now that Space Marine 2 is coming out, his old videos are coming up on my feed, and it's a really sad feeling. But as a way to honor TB, I know he would really love this game, even though it's missing an FOV slider. But watching him is what introduced me to the Warhammer universe. I gave Space Marine 1 a try and I was blown away by its gameplay and its setting. It was so cool, but there were never really any games that really grabbed my attention. They have a ton of games out there, even RTSs that people really loved in the past and aren't doing so well nowadays. I think the actual Total War, the fantasy franchise, is doing alright and has been doing well overall. And then there's like Blood Bowl and all that stuff. But the Warhammer universe in general is massive, especially games like Vermintide and then Darktide in the 40k universe. And I did a review on Darktide a couple months back where I went back to the game after its release and saw if it got any better, and I had a really fun and good time. But playing through Darktide, it reminded me that, like, man, I really like this universe and I want to see more of it, more games of this caliber. And we had Space Marine 2 on the way, and from everything that I saw, it looked fucking incredible. It looked just like what I remember the first game looking like, and it very much feels like a 360 era game lost to time and landing at our feet today. And I did give other games a shot, like Rogue Trader, but that is a turn-based RPG, which I do love and I've dumped a ton of time into it, but there's a production value that's still missing there, right? It still looks like a smaller game, but the one thing about the 40k universe is that it's massive in so many different aspects, and to do it justice, you would need a huge budget. Hey, they believed in this project and put all that goddamn miniature money behind it, as Gamesworkshop gave them the license and trusted them to make a sequel to Space Marine 1 in hopes to capture a whole new audience on the gaming end. And I think Space Marine 2 may actually bridge the gap and bring in a whole slew of new fans that'll be interested in future titles. But that's giving it away a little early. If you've never been on my channel, how I do my reviews is I list the positives, then I list the negatives, then I condense everything to my final thoughts at the end of the video. So let's get started with the review for Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. The biggest compliment I can give to this game is that it is a portal into the 40k universe. As soon as you walk into that first mission and look at that landscape of all those fucking Tyranids just crossing the field and laser fire going everywhere, you're completely transported and in it. And everyone around you is so grim and dark and just not brooding, but filled with this zealous fire to serve their emperor. And it's scary in a lot of ways. They don't seem like the good guys, but you can't help get caught up on it as they're calling you brother and battle brother as you fight together to defeat these swarms of horrible aliens. And I just totally got wrapped up in it again. As with like Rogue Trader, I still feel a little disconnected as I'm like overlooking everything and not completely in it. My protagonist is silent and it is a lot of reading. And with Darktide, it feels like you're in this little pocket of the world and you're also like working for the Inquisition and doing missions on the side. And it's not as full blown out. The scale is still there in that game, but again, I just didn't get wrapped into like the zealous fire of the Empire like it did in this one. And man, they go for it. And they try to like show how fucking cool it is to be a Space Marine. As with the first mission, you're starting off as a Death Shield or whatever the shit they're called, and he has this awesome armor going on a solo suicide mission. God damn it, man. Look, if you're a 40k fan and you're just kind of on the edge here, this is your game. You've been waiting for this game for an incredibly long time, and it's finally here. The only game that would truly fulfill like my 40k desires is like a full blown out Baldur's Gate 3 style RPG in the Warhammer 40k universe. Again, Rogue Trader's like halfway there, but it doesn't have the production values. And imagine Rogue Trader with the production values of Baldur's Gate 3 and the music and spectacle and graphics from Space Marine 2. I just want more of this world, and every time I journey into it, I am just blown away and desperately fighting to not buy a bunch of miniatures. But it is not all spectacle and immersion. It is still a video game, and Space Marine 2 is probably one of the best third-person action shooter games I've played in quite a while, while still feeling like a Gears of War, but not so heavy and a lot more capable, I would say. One thing I kind of lose it with like Left 4 Dead type games or even Darktide and Vermintide is the feeling of being whittled down, the feeling of shooting into a massive horde and not feeling like you're doing much, and the feeling when a bigger monster comes to fight you, you don't have very many defensive capabilities, and it's like about like healing, and they're kind of whittling you down and kind of jumping from person to person, beating the shit out of them. The tank in Left 4 Dead is a great example where like people are gonna take damage. It's really hard to like completely avoid that. So I always hated the feeling in massive horde swarm shooting games, the feeling of being whittled down. Space Marine 2 is fucking hard, especially on veteran. It's incredibly hard, but they do give you tools to just get good at play. There is a parry system where you can even parry little monsters that are coming at you, and then there's a lock-on system and a dodge roll system, so that whenever a big guy is in the group of enemies, you lock onto his ass. You don't even care about the little guys around you. It's just me and this motherfucker, and we're gonna just juke it out. And it's so goddamn cool feeling as you're fighting all these big ass enemies, and all these little shits are fighting around you as well, and your boys are like protecting you, stunning them, popping their shit and their cooldowns. It's a incredible spectacle, but also there is substance behind it, as you have to be really good at dodge rolling and parrying. The parry system has this big blue circle where it's like, hey, parry now, and you like do a big stun, but you can also parry regular attacks, which I don't feel like the game is very good at explaining, that the parry works on everything. So all of the little shit's just randomly attacking you, parry, boom, hit. Or whenever it's a bigger guy and he's just swinging randomly, you can parry those attacks too. You can parry more than just the telegraphed attacks. And then with the melee system and how fast and swift it feels, and just enough combos and depth to keep it interesting, right? The fear with like melee weapons in a shooter is sometimes that it's just like, oh, 1 2 3 combo or one hit combo, and it feels kind of boring. Destiny is a really good example of that, of like you just slash the sword 3 times constantly and it like auto locks, and it doesn't feel very good. The melee combat in this game feels absolutely incredible, and every weapon has its plus and minuses, and I love just playing around with them and seeing what combos are good for what and when I should be using certain abilities. But you still have the shooting on top of that with the parry and the stunning, where you stun an enemy, then you quickly pull out your pistol and shoot them, and if you like perfect dodge sometimes or do a perfect parry randomly, you can again just do it again, and it gives you more invincibility frames so that you're fighting this horde of enemies. It is very much about controlling that chaos, and then when there's significant threats, dispatching them as quickly and as efficiently as possible without using all your resources or going down too many times. And it's a lot of fun. And then when you get actual co-op members go around you using their abilities correctly, standing in one point, gaining armor and supporting each other, it's some of the best. As soon as I started playing this game, it felt incredible, and I knew it was like, oh, I really like how this game plays immediately. The way the bolter just goes into groups of enemies and they just fucking explode and all that type of stuff. You very much feel like you're this incredible badass the whole time. And the next great thing about this is a game from a miniatures franchise. So naturally, people want to customize their Space Marine and how they look and all their little ornaments and all that stuff. And this game has it, man. There's a ton of little unlocks and trinkets and colors that you can go through and play with to customize your Space Marine for the co-op missions and the PvP mode. So it gives you a long giant list and charts of just like the different Space Marine chapters and what colors they use, and like, hey, do you want to use these colors and match them, and kind of build out your own Space Marine. And people make some wacky shit like the Crayon Marine I've seen going around, but man, there's some ones on the Reddit where people are really creative with their how they're choosing the colors. And I imagine these people are like crazy people whenever they're looking at their little miniatures and just painting them perfectly. And that's what that system feels like, right? It feels like they give you a miniature and you're just like, all right, go crazy, because you can color every little piece and part and change out the parts, different parts. There is some colors and I think a few pieces hid behind DLC, but a vast majority, like 99%, are in the game and unlockable through playing. There's no real microtransactions other than like the few colors that they labeled as DLC, which is a tad annoying, but there's already a ton in the game in itself. But yeah, I feel so uncreative making my Space Marine because I just don't know where to begin. But then you see all these pictures of what other people are doing, or you go into PVE or PvP matches, you see their Space Marine, you're like, man, that's goddamn cool. I wish I was that talented. And the last positive I want to talk about is the game's scope and size. Expectations for the size and price of games have gotten absolutely wild. Whereas $60 game is now expected to be as long as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Back in the 360 era, we got games like this constantly for this price point, with a 6 to 8 hour campaign, maybe some co-op missions just like this, and PvP. They're always this like solidified package, no battle passes, no 10-year long plan, not all these microtransactions, none of that. It was just a solid game that maybe the multiplayer would last 6 months to a year. And then if the multiplayer was spectacular, and the developers would then support it if they wanted to, or maybe they just worked on the next game. But there was never this weird feeling of people looking at a game is like, what? It's only 100 hours. And I understand that, right? Games are expensive and you have to pick and choose. So like if you're on the fence, I would definitely be like, yeah, get this on sale or wait a bit. But the package in itself is super solid, especially if you're a 40K fan or interested in the 40K universe. $60 for what is here is really, really good. And one thing I really appreciate is they're just focused on, hey, this is what we want to do, and we want to do it super well. And they did. When you walk into those campaign missions and just look around at what the fuck is even happening, and how the Tyranids are like crawling on each other and running up walls and shit, and you can shoot them and they're actually there, and you'll actually watch them slowly crawl up. So if you didn't kill them, they're actually gonna spawn and fight you. Things like that. The waves of enemies out in the distance, absolutely mind-blowing. And then again, the breadth of customization in the game and the quality. And that's very much what this game is. It is very much quality over quantity in a lot of ways. They didn't choose to make this crazy open world game that they're gonna have a 10-year plan or a free-to-play shooter with all these battle passes and fucking whatnot. They're like, oh, we're gonna play this game for fucking ever. They very much honored the legacy of Space Marine 1. Like, hey, here's this game. We're gonna add to the systems that were there before and improve them in a lot of ways. And then, hey, oh yeah, let's add some co-op on there. Get your boys to play with each other and have this incredible squad experience. The PvP was a part of Space Marine 1. It was totally fine back in the day. It was kind of fun, but it was nothing that was gonna blow out the world and become a fucking esport or anything like that. It was a solid multiplayer shooter, and that's what's here. The campaign you're gonna play through, it's gonna be 6 to 8 hours, and it's gonna be a fucking incredible roller coaster. And then there are harder modes if you want to play with your boys and try to take this on the highest difficulty for achievements and whatnot. I have memories of playing the old Halo games on Legendary with my friends just because we wanted to. Not because we were gonna get some XP or anything like that, but it puts a little icon on the thing like, hey, you beat this mission on normal and heroic and legendary. And it felt really good to like go through that and complete it. And I feel like in campaigns, they're just kind of one and done for lots of people, or nowadays, or that's the expectation. So I really like that they added the multiple difficulty levels for you to go through this spectacle again, and with some solid ass gameplay. There's some variety here because the gameplay is so good. It's not like Call of Duty where you just fucking follow a guy for 6 hours. There's some dense, incredible action. Then we move on to the co-op, which in itself is only 6 missions, and each mission maybe lasts 30 to 40 minutes. So right, it's not hundreds of hours, but again, there's this massive progression system they've laid out in the game, and talents and classes. They could have made a whole free-to-play ass game just with the systems they have in this part of the game, but no, they wanted to make a sequel to Space Marine 1, not some bastardized free-to-play game. So hey, here's our co-op part of the game now, and we know you all love co-op and we're going to support it. And they added all the customization in terms of classes, but also how you can customize your Space Marine, and synergy between your co-op partners, and added a Left 4 Dead style wave system where I believe it's called like the actor system or the director system in Left 4 Dead, right? Where, hey, sometimes different enemies will spawn and big waves will come if you're taking too long, or depending how you're playing through the level. That's what these co-op missions feel like. They feel like Darktide levels or Left 4 Dead levels. It's just that sadly there's only 6 of them. The game could probably use like 3 to 4 more, but what's there is super solid and they're extremely fun to play through. And again, there's leveling and progression and perks and talent and gear that you unlock playing through it, so that there's actual progression to where you get to the highest difficulty of play and test your mettle. So if you're really into those missions and that combat and just playing with your buddies, there's some stuff to chew on here. And then there's the PvP 6v6 matches with team deathmatch and control and King of the Hill. Again, this game feels like a 360 game lost to time, and we're only getting it now because this is what lots of games used to do. And there were some games that where their multiplayer was like, oh hey, this is pretty good, but it's not Call of Duty. But you would have fun with it for a couple months or maybe a year or whatnot, and playing it off and on as long as there was a player base. And I'm glad that they added this mode, right? Even though it's not like this incredible huge mode, it's still solid and fun, and it feels like grabbing your toys and just bashing the shit out of them against each other. And there's some tactics and co-op play and using your abilities and getting behind people and flanking and whatnot. There's some tactics in the actual play and there is skill, but again, they weren't trying to make a game that was like going to be this fucking esport that you play for 10 years and whatnot, and they're going to constantly patch. They just wanted to make a solid PvP mode with the tools they had and let you bash the shit out of these Marines together and see what happens. And a lot of reviews came out and they didn't even get to try out the PvP. I've dove in quite a bit into it, and it's pretty damn fun. Again, it is nothing mind-blowing. It is nothing that's gonna make me be like, oh, I'm gonna play this forever. But like, I don't know, man. One day when I want to chill and just play some matches, and it's not this game where like people are trying to meta and try hard the shit out of, and you just again go in there and bash these Space Marines together, have some fun, unlock some more cosmetics, play with the other different unlocks and skins that you get for your characters, and just have a generally good time. Space Marine 2 feels like 3 good games. Not amazing games, but really good games, all batched into one. And again, if you're around the 360 era, that's kind of how things used to be. But nowadays, games have gotten so bloated and just kind of waste your time or want you to keep playing for years and seasons and FOMO. While this is just a solid package. They did say, hey, they're going to support it and add stuff to the game, but what's here is already solid in itself, and there doesn't feel like this crazy expectation of it be like, oh well, I need to dedicate my life and fill out this battle pass to this game every 3 to 4 months. No, man. Oh, I need to get good at this game because it'll be the next esport. No, man. It's just a solid ass third-person shooter. And what I believe the $60 value comes from is the actual quality of everything you're looking at, the spectacle, how it feels, and so forth. Hours played is determined on you, right? You're gonna get a 10 to 15 hours just playing this on your own, but if you enjoy the PvP, it's there. If you enjoy deep diving into the co-op, it's there. Or if you enjoy playing campaigns multiple times and challenging yourself, it's there, and you'll get your money's worth for sure. But it's very much like those old Halo 3 and Halo 2 days of like, hey, you gotta want it, right? They're not gonna put a weird carrot on the stick to fill out your battle pass or some shit for you. You gotta want to play it, and hey, this game is fun to play, so I want to play it. But like I said, this game is not perfect, but realistically, I don't really have a ton of complaints, and I just got a few things that I wish they would work on or add, or just didn't really work with me. So let's get into the negatives. So I'm gonna split this really quick from PvE to PvP, as the games are kind of separate in a lot of ways. So again, with the co-op missions, they're really fun and incredible with all the different modes and whatnot, and the way the enemies actually interact in that mode is a lot more interesting than a scripted campaign. But there's sadly only 6 of these missions, and the game probably could have used 3 to 4 more realistically, right? So like Darktide has a bunch of different missions. I don't know how many it has exactly, but it has quite a bit. And there were times when I was playing Darktide that were repeating, but the difficulty of the modes and the variations of how the enemies are spawning kept it interesting enough, right? And then there's the progression, which this game has, but it does think when you get the same mission over and over, or kind of plays out the same way, the co-op mode could use a couple more missions. And to be fair, part of the support and the free support is they are going to add more co-op missions over time, eventually planning to add a horde mode to the freaking game. So I bet a whole new wave of players are going to come in whenever they actually add that mode. I really can't wait to see it, man, because as you play this game, you realize you're like, man, the horde mode of this game is going to be fucking incredible. Are you kidding me? It's fun now. If I have an arena for me and my buddies just sit there and just crank it out, oh, it'd be so goddamn fun. So I'm really excited for the future in terms of that part, but currently the co-op, only 6 missions. But again, the progression goes deep and the difficulty modes goes pretty deep as well. I just wish there's a bit more variety. And that's really all I have for the co-op part. It's actually the campaign part where I was a bit annoyed or disappointed. Sadly, there's no real customization in the actual campaign of the game. In the co-op missions there is, and it's using that system. But in the main game, you're as Titus and his 2 cohorts going through the game, and you can't customize them at all. Which is really disappointing, because like I really like how my Space Marines look, and I wish like in New Game Plus mode I could use them or something. But no, it's very much focused and tied. There are skins you can get for them, but again, it doesn't have that large incredible system for the main campaign. That is all only in PvP and the co-op missions. So I really wish they work on a way to like bring the characters you've made over here, or even to grab those classes and abilities and talents and play with them in the campaign. But again, they're just like very separate at the moment. I wish they crossed over a bit more. I know for design reasons, there's reasons why like they don't want you to just have the fucking jetpack all the time and whatnot. And they very much, you play through the campaign and there's very specific points when they give you certain items because they're pacing it, and it's supposed to be a linear campaign, and having certain items at certain points would probably break the whole fucking thing. But I really hope that there's like an adventure mode they're able to work on in the future, or something where it's just like, hey, let me get these characters that I made and unlocked all this cool stuff for, and let me play through it in the campaign. I just want to get my toys and play with them over here as well. And the last thing is the AI sometimes feels totally fine and smart, but there are some points in the veteran game mode where they're just fucking dumb as shit, or just not doing anything, not shooting, and it feels like you're just playing by yourself and these guys are like barely there. Sometimes you'll see them do shit and execute guys, but there's a lot of times when you're like, man, I'm really feeling the pressure because this game gets pretty hard on veteran mode, and the fucker's just standing there. And it's just really annoying. Of course, if you play with co-op and friends, it completely removes that problem. So I definitely recommend that if you are playing on the harder difficulties. But yeah, the AI just needs to be a bit more aggressive, especially on those harder missions where they like expect you to do certain things and you have to like hold square in a thing, but you're getting shot in the back and your guys are just not doing anything. Stuff like that. Or maybe they go do the objectives while you deal with the monsters. I don't know. But the AI is a bit wonky at times. And the next negative is the PvP. Again, in itself, the PvP is a totally fine mode, and yeah, you could probably pick it apart and be like, well, this is not good as Apex or like Gears 4 or something. It was never meant to be like that, and the scope is fine. It is a totally well done PvP mode. I just wish there was a few more maps, as the maps repeat constantly, and I think there's like 3 or 4 that they're pretty large realistically, as sometimes you'll be running around the map and not seeing anyone, especially in team deathmatch. But it just needs maybe like 3 to 4 more maps to give some more variety, as yeah, they get a little bit tiring seeing the same thing. The PvP, other than the progression system, feels really small in scope. And I think they very much didn't want to invest too much resources into it, and that's totally fine. That's how it should have been, and mainly focus on co-op, which they did. But the PvP in itself feels a little small at the moment and can use a little bit more. Don't invest too much into it. It's just going to be a fun side thing, and people are mostly going to enjoy the PvE aspects of the game, but PvP could use a little bit of love, and I hope they do add a couple more maps and whatnot. But again, the depth of systems comes from the classes and how many unlocks and all that crazy shit are in the game, and customizations. And one thing with the PvP is the parry currently kind of feels useless. The parry is very strong in PvE, but melee combat's always a little bit weird whenever you're doing a PvP game. Elden Ring and Dark Souls has been around, and it still feels fucking weird trying to melee each other in those games. Shooting usually feels fine and feels great and feels perfect in this game, but again, the melee still feels a little bit laggy. And then the parry in itself feels a bit weak, as it works like pretty fine in the main campaign and the PvE, but in PvP you parry someone and they just keep fucking swinging, and there's not enough punishment or getting parried. So lots of the times just people are just running up to each other and spamming melee attacks, because like actually parrying them, they're just gonna hit you right after the parry, and there's not enough punishment for actually doing it, or perfect parrying. There's the shield bash that stuns a bit, and the large hammer swing that stuns quite a bit. Feels like a system they're just like, oh fuck it, like we can't get this to work, or they just didn't put too much focus on it. It feels a bit weak, and so the melee ends up being a little bit spammy, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of back and forward. It is just kind of like running up to each other and dodge rolling back and forward and just like spamming attacks. So I wish there was just a bit more depth to the melee in PvP, I guess I would say. And that's my negatives. Like I said, I don't really have a ton of complaints because the game's scope really well. Like someone could come to this and be like, well, the game isn't 100 hours or some shit like that, or like, oh, this old trite 360 era multiplayer game. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's what it was trying to be. It was trying to be a sequel to Space Marine 2, and it very much succeeded in doing that. This game's main goal was to get that universe and bring it up to date and bring the carnage that is behind all of it and put it on your fucking screen, and it's so goddamn good at that. Every line spoken, you can feel the weight behind it. The way you crush and plow through enemies just is so goddamn satisfying, and they nailed every little slice and bone crush, execution, gunshot. Space Marine 2 is Space Marine 2 is like a testosterone overload. And I understand people have been looking for a game like this for quite a while, as like Gears of War used to fill this hole in a lot of ways, like this big co-op action spectacle gruesome ass game that kind of just like gives no fucks. And yeah, it's really good. Like the main complaint is like, yeah, like price point, and I think $60 is a fine price point, but hey, that's gonna be your choice. Like, hey, where do you find value in games? Do you really need to play a game for 100 hours, or do you like a solid 20-30 hour experience? And that experience is really high quality. Astrobot came out, and again, another spectacular game with a focused scope that is crushing it right now, because it just focused on what it wanted to do and wasn't trying to be this massive ass, large ass game that needs 500 fucking people and 8 years of development. It focused on what it needed to do and did it well. Space Marine 2 focused on what it needed to do. There is money behind this game, and you can fucking tell. It focused down and did exactly what this game needed to do, and they plan to support it more in the future, and I'm all here for it. My hope is the team that created this game stick around a bit more, and Games Workshop give them more leeway to do more games in the 40k universe, as they've already built this system. A great example of this is the Final Fantasy VII Remake team. After they made Remake, they made Rebirth, which was a fucking massive game, and it is only cause they made Remake. So they were able to build off the original game using what they've built before and moving forward, instead of this constant thing where everyone's fucking starting from square one and games aren't really being built on, or their scope is just way too wild. Space Marine 2 is focused, incredible, and solid, and makes me excited for Space Marine 3 or whatever crazy ass Warhammer 40k game they decide to do in the future, because they've shown they can do it. And if this game is successful, they're going to stick around and they're going to do another one, and I am so excited for that. Let me know how you feel in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Random Drop review. Peace.